12 black actresses who had unusual body parts. Hollywood spent decades selling one narrow version of beauty, but many black actresses walked in carrying features the industry could not easily label, and somehow those same features made them impossible to forget. This story is not about judgment. It is about presence power and the bodies Hollywood once called unusual before audiences called them iconic. Stay with us and subscribe to Black Legends Revealed for more stories that reveal the truth behind the image. Viola Davis. Viola Davis built her power from the places Hollywood usually tells women to hide. Before the awards, before the red carpets, before she became one of the rare performers to achieve EGOT status, she carried a private fear that followed her into mirrors, auditions, and bedrooms. In her late 20s, Davis experienced alopecia, a condition that caused hair loss and shook her sense of confidence. For an actress working in an industry obsessed with beauty, hair, and perfection, it felt like losing control over the image she was expected to present. For years, she covered that vulnerability with wigs. Davis has spoken about wearing them constantly, even in private, because the thought of being seen without hair felt unbearable. The pain was not only physical, it was emotional, cultural, and deeply personal. Black women's hair has always carried meaning: pride, identity, judgment, politics, and survival. So when Davis began losing hers, she was not simply hiding a medical condition. She was protecting a part of herself from an industry that rarely gives black women room to be fragile. What happens when the thing a woman fears most becomes the very truth that sets her free? That turning point arrived on How to Get Away with Murder. In one unforgettable scene, Davis's character removes her wig and makeup, stripping away the polished mask piece by piece. The moment was quiet, but it landed like thunder. Millions saw something rarely shown on primetime television: a black woman not performing perfection, not softening her pain, not hiding behind glamour. Just presence, just truth. From that moment forward, Davis's story carried a different weight. Her 2015 Emmy win made history, but her greater victory was redefining what strength could look like. She did not need flawless hair to command a screen. She did not need Hollywood's narrow beauty rules to become unforgettable. Viola Davis turned a hidden struggle into a declaration: the most powerful image is not the one carefully protected, but the one finally revealed. Lupita Nyong'o. Lupita Nyong'o's most visible difference was never a flaw. It was the very thing Hollywood had spent decades refusing to honor properly: her deep, luminous, dark skin. When she arrived in 12 Years a Slave, audiences did not see the polished beauty Hollywood usually packaged for stardom. They saw a face the camera could not ignore, a presence shaped by pain, stillness, and extraordinary emotional control. As Patsy Lupita carried suffering in her eyes, her posture even in the silence between her lines. Her body became part of the story, fragile under violence, yet never empty of dignity. Her Oscar win in 2014 looked like a breakthrough, but behind that victory was a deeper struggle. Lupita later spoke about growing up feeling unbeautiful because darker skin was rarely celebrated in mainstream beauty culture. That truth gave her rise a sharper meaning. Hollywood praised her elegance, placed her on magazine covers, and applauded her talent, but the industry still seemed uncertain about how to build enough leading roles around a dark-skinned black woman. Why does a woman have to be extraordinary just to make the world accept the beauty it once ignored? That is where her story becomes powerful. Lupita did not hide the feature that made her different. She turned it into a symbol of command. In Black Panther, her skin glowed against the royal imagery of Wakanda. In Us, her face became both terrifying and heartbreaking, proving she could carry beauty, horror, intelligence, and emotional weight in the same frame. The so-called difference on her body was not something to overcome. It was something Hollywood had to learn to see correctly. Lupita Nyong'o's journey is not about physical imperfection. It is about an industry whose standards were too narrow to recognize her fully at first. Her dark skin, once treated by society as a barrier, became part of her cinematic power. She stands on screen with quiet force, reminding audiences that beauty does not need permission from old systems. Sometimes the feature they tried to dismiss becomes the very reason the world cannot look away. Gabourey Sidibe. Gabourey Sidibe's body became the first thing Hollywood tried to talk about long before many people were willing to discuss her talent. When she appeared in Precious in 2009, she did not fit the industry's narrow image of a leading actress. Her size, her face, her stillness, and her unpolished realism made her look different from the women Hollywood usually placed at the center of dramatic stories. But that difference was not weakness. It was exactly what made her performance feel so painfully real. She carried Precious not like a character written for awards, but like a wounded girl trying to survive inside a world that had already judged her. After the film became a critical success, Sidibe received an Academy Award nomination and worldwide attention. Yet instead of being celebrated only for her acting, she was forced to endure cruel public commentary about her weight and appearance. Hollywood praised the performance, but the culture around Hollywood kept asking whether a woman with her body belonged in fame, fashion, romance, or leading roles. Why does a black actress have to prove her humanity before people can simply call her brilliant? Her story connects strongly to a title about black actresses judged for unusual or non-traditional physical features because Sidibe's body became the battleground. She was not rejected because she lacked screen power. She was questioned because she challenged beauty standards, built around thinness, polish, and acceptability. Still, she kept working in American horror story empire and directing projects showing humor, authority, intelligence, and emotional control beyond the role that introduced her. Gabourey Sidibe did not let Hollywood reduce her body to a limitation. She turned visibility into defiance. Later, when she spoke about mental health confidence and her personal medical choices, including weight loss surgery, she made it clear that her body belonged to her, not to critics, tabloids, or an industry obsessed with image. Her journey is powerful because she did not become cinematic by fitting the mold. She became unforgettable by breaking it. Jada Pinkett Smith. Jada Pinkett Smith has always carried a presence that feels composed, deliberate, and controlled. From early roles in Set It Off to her long-standing visibility in Hollywood, she built an image rooted in strength and elegance. But for years, there was a private fear unfolding behind that control. Around 2018, she began experiencing hair loss caused by alopecia, an autoimmune condition that arrives without warning and reshapes how a person sees themselves in the mirror. At first, she tried to manage it quietly. She has spoken on Red Table Talk about the shock of seeing handfuls of hair come loose during everyday routines. For someone living in a world where appearance is constantly examined, that moment carried more than physical change. It carried exposure. Wigs, styling adjustments, and careful presentation became part of maintaining her public image. But unlike earlier eras of her life, this time she chose not to stay silent. How do you hold on to identity when the part of you the world recognizes begins to disappear? The shift came when she decided to stop hiding. Jada appeared publicly with a shaved head, not as a fashion statement, but as a form of acceptance. The reaction was immediate. Some admired her openness, others questioned it. And rumors spread, as they often do when a woman refuses to follow expected norms. Yet one moment stood out. Standing beside Will Smith at a public event, she carried that new image without apology, turning what could have been seen as vulnerability into presence. Jada Pinkett Smith belongs in this title because it reflects a modern version of pressure visibility in the age of constant commentary. She did not wait for the industry to redefine beauty for her. She redefined it in real time. Her alopecia was not something she allowed to shrink her identity. Instead, it became part of a larger statement about control, honesty, and self-acceptance in a world that often rewards concealment. Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi Goldberg did not arrive in Hollywood shaped for easy approval. She came with a voice that was raw, direct, and impossible to soften, a presence built from survival rather than polish. Before film, she was performing one-woman shows that blended humor, pain, and sharp social observation, eventually catching the attention of Steven Spielberg, who cast her in The Color Purple 1985. That role earned her an Academy Award nomination and introduced audiences to a kind of talent that did not rely on traditional beauty, but on emotional truth. What made Goldberg stand out also became what the industry struggled to fully embrace. Her appearance, natural hair, unconventional features. A refusal to conform to Hollywood's narrow expectations placed her outside the typical leading lady mold of the time. Yet she moved across genres with remarkable control comedy and sister-act drama in Ghost, where she won an Academy Award and later television as a long-running host on The View. Still, even with success, she often had to carve her own path rather than follow one already built. Why does someone have to become extraordinary just to be accepted when they refuse to fit the mold? Her story connects to a title about black actresses judged for unusual physical features because Goldberg never changed herself to be easier to market. Instead, she expanded what audiences could accept. She built a career on intelligence, timing, and emotional range rather than conventional image. There were periods where roles became less frequent, where Hollywood seemed uncertain about where to place her, but she remained visible by shifting mediums and redefining her presence. Whoopi Goldberg did not lose everything. She refused to be limited by what she was never meant to be. Her career is a testament to endurance in an industry that often rewards sameness. She made space where none existed, turning difference into authority. In doing so, she changed the expectation of what a leading black actress could look like, sound like, and represent. Winnie Harlow. Winnie Harlow did not enter fashion by blending in. She arrived by refusing to disappear. Born with vitiligo, a condition that causes depigmentation of the skin. She grew up in a world that often treated difference as something to hide. As a child, she faced bullying and isolation, with classmates reducing her to labels instead of seeing a person. The mirror became complicated, not a place of vanity, but a place where identity had to be rebuilt again and again. Her turning point did not come quietly. In 2014, she appeared on America's Next Top Model, where her skin, once the source of ridicule, became impossible to ignore. The industry reacted in mixed ways. Admiration on the surface, hesitation underneath. Some brands saw uniqueness, others saw risk. What happens when the very thing that once made someone feel excluded becomes the reason the world finally pays attention? That tension followed her into early modeling opportunities where conversations about beauty were often framed around novelty rather than acceptance. But Winnie Harlow refused to let her identity be reduced to a headline. She stepped into campaigns for major brands, walked international runways, and appeared in global publications, shifting how beauty could be seen at scale. Importantly, she spoke openly about vitiligo, correcting misconceptions and pushing back against narratives that treated her skin as a flaw. She was not interested in being inspiring in a shallow way. She demanded to be understood on her own terms. Winnie Harlow's story belongs in this title because it transforms the idea of difference into visibility with purpose. She did not change her skin to fit the industry. She changed how the industry looks at skin. Her presence challenges a long-standing assumption that beauty must be uniform, controlled, and predictable. Instead, she stands as proof that what once isolates can become a defining strength when the person living with it decides not to hide anymore. Grace Jones. Grace Jones did not arrive in fashion and music to be accepted. She arrived to disrupt. In the late 1970s and 1980s, her presence cut through every room she entered. Angular cheekbones, sculpted features, a body that blurred gender expectations, and a gaze that felt both distant and commanding. While many models were shaped to fit a standard, Grace Jones looked like something entirely different, almost architectural, as if her face had been carved rather than softened. Her appearance quickly became a point of fascination and controversy. Critics struggled to categorize her, often describing her features as too sharp, too masculine, too unconventional for mainstream beauty. Yet photographers like Helmut Newton and Jean-Paul Goude saw something else, a visual force that did not need correction. Under studio lights, her Her cheekbones cast natural shadows, creating depth without heavy makeup. What others tried to soften, she amplified. What happens when the face the world calls too different becomes the one it cannot stop looking at? Behind that bold image was a deliberate choice. Grace Jones did not reshape herself to ease discomfort, she leaned into it. Her performances, album covers, and fashion moments pushed beyond traditional femininity, turning her into a symbol of control rather than compromise. Rumors and criticism followed her, but they only reinforced her identity as someone who refused to be simplified. In an industry built on repetition, she became unforgettable precisely because she could not be repeated. Grace Jones's belongs in this title because she transformed difference into dominance. Her features were never a flaw. They were a challenge to the system itself. Instead of asking to be included, she redefined the rules of beauty around her. Today, her image still feels ahead of its time, sharp, fearless, and impossible to ignore, reminding us that sometimes the most powerful presence comes from refusing to become what the world expects. Angela Bassett. Angela Bassett did not enter Hollywood quietly. She arrived with intensity, discipline, and a physical presence that refused to be ignored. When she transformed into Tina Turner in What's Love Got to Do with It? 1993 audiences expected a powerful performance. What they didn't expect was the reaction to her body. Her arms, defined muscular, almost sculptural, became a headline of their own. In an industry that often celebrates softness, her strength stood out in a way that made people stare twice. That attention quickly shifted into speculation. Paparazzi photos captured her leaving training sessions, veins visible under the skin muscles shaped by months of preparation. Rumors began to circulate questioning how an actress could develop such definition. Bassett later made it clear her transformation came from relentless discipline, weight training, strict nutrition, and hours of physical conditioning to embody Tina Turner authentically. But the conversation had already taken on a life of its own. Why does strength in a woman sometimes invite suspicion instead of respect? That question sits at the center of her story, where achievement was often overshadowed by doubt. What makes Angela Bassett's chapter fit this title is not just her physique, but the meaning behind it. Her arms were not unusual because they were unnatural. They were unusual because they challenged expectation. In later roles, from action films to dramatic performances, she continued to carry that same physical authority, proving it was not a moment, but a standard she set for herself. Over time, what was once questioned became admired. Her body told a story of preparation, commitment, and control qualities that defined her career just as much as her acting. In a world that often tries to define beauty narrowly, Angela Bassett expanded it, showing that strength can be just as striking as elegance and far more enduring. Alfre Woodard. Alfre Woodard does not enter a frame the way Hollywood once demanded its leading women should. There is no manufactured stillness, no polished symmetry designed for easy consumption. Instead, she arrives with presence alive, shifting, deeply human. Born in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1952, her path into acting was shaped not by conventional beauty standards, but by something far more enduring, emotional precision and a face that refuses to hide what it feels. Critics have long noted her uniquely expressive features, eyes that seem to carry entire histories, a voice textured with warmth and gravity. In an industry that often reduces bodies to surface value, Woodard's physicality became something different, an instrument of truth. What made her stand out was not an unusual body in the sensational sense, but how she used every visible detail, her posture, her stillness, even the cadence of her breath to command attention. In films like Cross Creek 1983, which earned her an Academy Award nomination, and later in Passion Fish, 1992, her performances revealed a physical storytelling style that felt almost musical. She did not rely on transformation through makeup or spectacle. Her body itself carried the narrative weight. Even on television in projects like Miss Evers' Boys 1997, she held the screen with a quiet intensity that made viewers lean in rather than look away. Have you ever watched an actor and felt like their silence said more than an entire page of dialogue? There is a reason Woodard has built one of the most respected careers in American acting without conforming to narrow expectations. She has received multiple Emmy Awards and a Golden Globe, not by fitting into a mold, but by reshaping it. Her face, often described as unconventional by outdated standards, became her greatest strength, capable of revealing contradiction, resilience, and vulnerability all at once. In an era where visibility was often tied to uniformity, Alfre Woodard turned difference into depth, and that is where her story quietly disrupts the title itself. Sometimes what's labeled unusual is simply what the world hasn't learned to fully see yet. Danai Gurira. She enters the frame with a presence that doesn't ask permission. Before audiences ever knew her as the blade-sharp Michonne in The Walking Dead or the commanding Okoye in Black Panther, Danai Gurira carried something visually striking that quietly set her apart: a sculpted, closely shaven head paired with sharply defined features that resisted Hollywood's long-standing obsession with softness. That look wasn't an accident, it was a decision. In interviews around her time on The Walking Dead, Gurira explained that shaving her head wasn't just about character authenticity. It became a statement of identity, rejecting narrow beauty standards that often dictate how Black women are presented on screen. When she appeared in Black Panther 2018, that same look became iconic. Millions saw strength, discipline, and elegance fused into a silhouette Hollywood rarely centered before. That physical distinction carried weight beyond aesthetics. In an industry where hair has historically been politicized, Gurira's choice aligned with a deeper cultural narrative. Her portrayal of Okoye demanded not only physical conditioning, rigorous combat training, weapons, choreography, but also the confidence to let her natural features stand fully exposed without the usual layers of styling or disguise. Would Hollywood have embraced that same look a decade earlier? Or did it take voices like hers to shift the frame off-screen? Gurira's work as a playwright, especially Eclipsed, which earned a Tony nomination, further reinforced that her presence wasn't built on appearance alone. Yet it's undeniable that her unusual physical presentation helped redefine what power looks like on a global stage. She wasn't softened for comfort. She was sharpened for truth. By the time she stepped onto major award stages and global press tours, that same distinctive image had become part of her legacy. There's a precision to how she moves, how she holds stillness, how the absence of conventional styling draws attention directly to expression, voice, and intention. Directors have noted how her face reads clearly on camera, every emotion unfiltered, every reaction immediate. That clarity, paired with her physical discipline, turned what might once have been labeled unconventional into something undeniably magnetic. Gurira didn't just fit into Hollywood's evolving standards, she helped reshape them one role at a time until what once seemed unusual became unforgettable. Tisha Campbell. Tisha Campbell arrives on screen with a kind of energy that refuses to sit still. Born in Oklahoma City in 1968 and raised in Newark, New Jersey, she grew up surrounded by performance music, stage movement, and that early rhythm never left her body. What made her stand out, especially in the 1990s, wasn't just her comedic timing in Martin or her warmth in My Wife and Kids. It was something more physical, more immediate. The elasticity of her face, the precision of her expressions, and a vocal texture that could shift from playful to piercing in seconds. In an industry that often prizes controlled, restrained beauty, Campbell's expressiveness felt almost too alive. Eyes widening, brows lifting, mouth shaping emotion with a theatrical sharpness that made every reaction land. Her unusual trait, if it must be named, lives in that heightened physical expressiveness. Watch her scenes in Martin and you'll see how her reactions often carry as much weight as the dialogue itself. She doesn't just deliver lines, her entire face participates. The quick shifts, the exaggerated glances, the sudden stillness before a punchline, these became her signature. But behind that control was discipline. Campbell trained in music and stage performance, and that foundation gave her the ability to modulate her body like an instrument. Have you ever noticed how some actors don't just speak, they seem to play their own face like a melody? There is also resilience written into her physical story. Campbell has spoken publicly about living with sarcoidosis, a serious inflammatory disease that affected her lungs and vocal strength. At one point, she had to relearn how to control her breathing and voice, rebuilding the very tools that defined her career. That struggle didn't diminish her presence, it deepened it. Her voice, once effortless, became something she had to fight to sustain, and that effort added a new layer of intention to every performance. Tisha Campbell's place in this title comes not from spectacle but from distinction. Her body, especially her face and voice, refuses neutrality. It moves, reacts, stretches, and reveals. In a space where subtlety is often mistaken for limitation, she proves that bold expression can be just as precise, just as controlled, and just as powerful. What others might have labeled too much, she turned into mastery alive, vibrant, and impossible to overlook. Thandiwe Newton. Thandiwe Newton's presence on screen feels almost disarming at first glance. Elegant, composed, seemingly effortless. Born in London in 1972 to a Zimbabwean mother and British father, her features reflect a striking blend of heritage that Hollywood once struggled to categorize. But what has consistently set her apart is not just beauty in a conventional sense. It's the unusual intensity of her facial symmetry paired with eyes that seem to hold conflicting emotions at once. There is a delicacy in her structure, yet something beneath it resists softness. In films like Beloved 1998 and later in Crash 2004, Newton's face becomes a space where vulnerability and tension coexist without resolution. That duality sharpened even further in her performance as Maeve in Westworld. Here, her physical stillness became a weapon. Newton didn't rely on dramatic gestures. Instead, she used micro-expressions, slight shifts in her gaze, the tightening of her jaw, the pause before a response to build an atmosphere of control and unpredictability. Her body often remained composed while her eyes suggested calculation, pain, and awakening all at once. Have you ever watched an actor whose smallest glance feels louder than an entire monologue? What makes Newton fit within this title is not an exaggerated physical difference, but the way her features defy easy reading. Her symmetry, often praised, becomes unusual in performance because it reveals too much and too little at the same time. Directors have leaned into that ambiguity, casting her in roles where identity perception and inner conflict take center stage. In Westworld, for example, her ability to hold still while suggesting internal transformation became the foundation of the character's evolution from controlled machine to self-aware force. Off-screen, Newton has spoken about navigating colorism and identity in an industry that often reduces complexity into categories. That lived experience informs the tension visible in her performances. Nothing feels superficial. Every look seems earned. Thandiwe Newton turns stillness into narrative and beauty into contradiction. What might appear perfect at first glance becomes something far more layered, an instrument capable of revealing fracture resilience and quiet rebellion without ever raising its voice. In Hollywood, beauty has never been just about appearance. It has been about who gets accepted, who gets questioned, and who is forced to prove that difference can still command the screen. The women in this story were often remembered for features that stood outside the industry's old idea of perfection, yet those same features became part of their power. What some called unusual, the camera sometimes turned into legend. So the real debate is not whether their bodies were different, but why Hollywood needed so long to see that difference as beauty. Follow and subscribe to Black Legends Revealed for more stories that challenge what fame tries to hide.